Hey, y'all. Welcome to Coffee with Steven. I'm Steven, and this is Coffee, and together we're just Coffee with Steven, but it sure makes a happy Steven. Yes, it does. So, y'all, today I am doing a interview with Stanley Perret. Stanley Perret is the author of a book that I just recently read called The Shattered Edge. It is the first in a series of books of the Legacy of the Forged Blade. So, the second book in this series is coming out a little bit later this month. So check it out. Check both books out. And he has other books as well. But I'm really excited to talk to Stanley just to get his insight on writing, insight on life. And I hope you enjoy it. So please, if you happen to have the opportunity, reach out to Stan and follow him on X and his blog. And I'll leave those in the comments. Also, he has a YouTube channel, so follow him on his YouTube channel. All that will be in his comments. So, y'all, here we go. Let's jump into an interview with Stanley Perret. Well, Stan, thank you so much for joining me on my first ever podcast on Coffee with Steven. And I just got to start out by saying, hey, do you have coffee? I mean, you can't come to the party without coffee. If you don't have coffee, we might have to reschedule the next Thursday or something. There you go.
Got my coffee.
So, are you an avid coffee drinker?
Yes, I love coffee. I took a little break from it for a little while, got into drinking tea, but back to the drinking coffee now.
You know, I'm going to bounce around. I wanted to show you before we got started. So, I have a template we're going to follow. It's it. This is it right here. So, there is nothing professional about what I'm doing. I get all these questions pre-planned so that we can talk about them. But
Okay.
I grew up and never drank coffee. I went into the army and never drank coffee. I met my wife when I was 32 or 33. I hope she doesn't hear this because I can't remember how old I was when I met her. But she was a Starbucks girl and she always liked her little frou-frou coffee. So as we were dating, I'd go to Starbucks and buy her coffee. And so one day I was like, okay, I'm going to try coffee. And they asked me, what do you want? I'm like, just coffee. You want sugar or cream in it? I'm like, nope, I just want coffee. And that started it. And I am not a Starbucks fan at all. I don't drink Starbucks coffee anymore. I buy beans from different people and weigh them out and then boil my water to a certain temperature and do my coffee that way. But it's always been black. I just like it black, I switch back and forth between decaf and caffeinated, and I don't have an addiction to coffee at all for the caffeine. I know that because I can just not drink it for a week or two and be okay. But I love the flavor of coffee. It is absolutely like just one of those joyous things in my life.
Oh yeah, coffee. I love coffee. I've tried different beans from all over the world. I was in the military as myself. I didn't start drinking coffee on a regular basis until I was in the Navy. The long shift out there on the ship and so forth, the long hours down there at DC Central and so forth. So, yeah, coffee became my best friend. And then a friend of mine introduced me. He's from way south Louisiana, even further south than I'm from. And he would like these coffees. And it was like put your spoon in it, it stands straight up type coffee.
Yeah.
A ton of sugar in it and a lot of milk. And you talk about giving you energy. So I drank those for many, many years. And then after getting out of the military, it just started going back to, okay, well, let me just have a regular cup of coffee. I wasn't a big fan of the flavored coffees and so forth. But I did try like the Irish cream, the vanilla flavored creamer. And I kind of like those a little bit, but I don't drink it all the time.
Yeah. I don't pick on anybody for their flavors of coffee or what they do with it. I just, everybody has a passion with it who drinks coffee and they like it their own way. And it's just like everything else in life. There's so many different ways you can do it, and there is no right way or wrong way. As long as you enjoy it, it's good for you. You mentioned your time in the Navy, and I I wanted to do this right from the get-go. It's tell you thank you for your service. I really appreciate it. I was in the Army, and I remember the first time somebody ever told me thank you for your service. It caught me off guard. I'm like, really? Oh, you're welcome. But anyway, Stan, thank you for your service. I think it is a very admirable, and to me, it is like I think every male should go into the service at some point in their life. And I know it's not required, but if I were the ruler of the world, every male would go into some branch of the service. But tell me what you did in the Navy.
Well, first off, thank you for thanking me for serving. It was an honor to serve, and thank you for your service as well. When I was in the Navy, I was a whole maintenance technician. Uh, they had a nickname for us. Some guys would call us turd chasers because we dealt with every single piping system on board the ship, all of the firefighting equipment. We dealt with first responder situations. I was part of it called the flying squad. So if there was a huge emergency on board the ship, there was a 10-team member out of 3,000 people on board the ship that would respond first. And we all wore these red jerseys that said flying squad on them. So whether it was a boiler room fire, steam room incident, or an emergency somewhere inside the ship, flooding or whatever, we were the first ones in to not only assess the situation, but also to try to control it the best that we could. So we were the first ones into the fires, and we were the first ones dealing with flooding if one took place. I eventually started really getting into not only what I was trained to do, because we were trained in everything from welding to general pipe maintenance and so forth, that the command sent me to schools to start getting certified in like high pressure welding. So I went all the way up to what was called a 4955 coded welder. It's one school away from being a nuke welder. They sent me to a torpedo mate school to learn how to repair torpedo systems. Why they did, I don't know, because we didn't have them on board our ship. But being a 4955 coded welder, they would fly us from our command to other ships that didn't have high pressure welders, because there are systems on board that nobody could weld on unless you were certified to do so, and our welds had to be x-rayed. So they would fly in x-ray techs, and they would fly in, myself and two other 4955 coded welders to these other ships. We would do these emergency repairs, and then they would fly us back to our ship. So that was kind of a unique thing to be a part of that. I eventually became a search and rescue swimmer as well on board our ship. So if we did have an incident or anything like that, they would send us out with the search and rescue teams. So my time in the Navy was a lot of fun. I miss it. We traveled all over the world.
Did you ever do any underwater welding?
Great. No, I'm not a certified underwater welder.
Okay.
I do know some underwater welders, and let me tell you something. Those guys go through some serious training, and I'm not sure if I would ever want to do that.
Right. Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, the basis of welding is you have this electrical current that's heating up, a metal that you're trying to, get other metals to bond. But just the fact that you've got all that current in your hand and you're underwater, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work in my head at all. So. All right, so I wanted to do something, if it's okay with you. I have two books of yours right here. I first bought The Shattered Edge, and it is. I'm going to ask this question because I'm really new to starting reading books, and the series is called Legacy of the Forged Blade, correct?
Correct.
All right, so the book is The Shattered Edge, and then I'll mention it a little bit later too, but you actually have the second book in this series coming out later this month, so I'm excited to get that. But I wanted, if it's okay with you, at the back of this book and also the other book that I have that actually just was on my doorstep when I come home yesterday is The Dragon in the Night. But in both of the books, maybe I can get both of the books in there. You have a little bit about yourself in the back of them, and I just kind of wanted to go through one of those and read it, if it's okay with you, and just kind of talk about it for a minute.
Okay.
So it says Stanley Perret is not your normal author and blogger. He has explored various genres, including personal growth and fantasy. He served honorably in the U.S. Navy, which we've talked about, and has faced significant challenges in his life, such as addiction, homelessness, and being a convicted felon. Despite these obstacles, he has shown that change is not only achievable, but also possible with determination. When I read that, and I've read it, pieces of that in both books that I got, and a little bit different verbiage on them, but that's right off the bat. That's just putting yourself out there for everybody to see. It's like, okay, here I am. This is me with all my good and bad, and I wanted to tell you, I think it takes a brave man to do something like that. So a long time ago, I was on Twitter before it became X, and I was really involved in a running community on there, and I got to be friends with a guy in Las Vegas who was homeless. And well, he wasn't homeless when we met, but he went through a homeless stage in his life, and he finally got a break and he worked himself out of it. But then he started a charity where he actually goes and he feeds homeless people. And I mean, it was just a big 180-degree turn for him. He was in a bad place in life, and he finally got helped by one person, and so he decided he would continue for the rest of his life repaying that favor. But I guess just point blank, what got you there?
There was a couple of different scenarios that bled into that. Some bad choices on my behalf, and I had some roommates that weren't the greatest people around me. I was living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at the time, and they kind of bailed out on everything. I got a bunch of bills. I just wasn't able to hold on to that. Me and my family, we don't really talk to each other because of just a bad history. So I walked away from it all and tried to rebuild my life. And the way I had to do it was live in my truck. And I didn't have a job at the time. I was working for Home Depot. I was living in my truck, and I had a small Chihuahua that lived in the truck with me. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, not enough hours, not enough income coming in, I couldn't afford an apartment. I couldn't afford a house. The local shelters weren't taking people who were just over inundated. So I was actually working for Home Depot and living in the parking lot underneath this tree for almost a year.
Wow.
And it just seemed like no matter how much I was trying to put money aside, just one thing after another. The truck was having issues, trying to pay for food and take care of this dog. And plus, at the same time, because of the military, and I don't military, it's just the PTSD thing. I had gotten real bad into drinking alcohol, so a large portion of my paycheck went towards buying alcohol. I was, in all honesty, a functioning alcoholic. So I would rather drink my dinner than, eat. So instead of saving money, I was drinking it.
Yeah.
And came to a breaking point. It turned out that my sister and my brother-in-law, because I was on Facebook, had seen a post that I had posted of me living in my truck. And they got a hold of me, and I left my job and I went and stayed with them. And it just started building back up from there. That didn't mean that my life was together. I was staying with their house. I got a small camper. Started living in that camper, but I was still an alcoholic. And then I got it back into the drug scene. From my addiction actually goes all the way back to my teen years, and I think the military was the only time I did not do any type of drugs, but I did drink when I was in the military. But that stretch of my life, the very dark point, because it only got worse.
Yeah.
And when I mean it got worse, there wasn't a single day that I didn't drink. I was going through probably about a half a gallon of Crown a day. I was going through a case or two of beer a day, and it just kept getting worse and worse. But I wasn't doing anything for myself to better myself. I was able to pay my bills, keep track of things, but there were other areas in my life that were suffering because life was all about me.
Yeah.
I didn't you were, didn't care what you did or anything like that. It was all about me. And it really didn't come to a head until around 2006, 2007, when I got out of the shower and I was actually dating my wife, and I got out of the shower and I didn't like what I saw. I didn't like the person that I had become. I could see that I had lost a lot of weight. I didn't like the way that I was treating people or the way that I talked to people. And to make it even worse on me, uh, I started reflecting back on everything that I had done since getting out of the military, uh, walking away from some very important parts of my life, uh, homelessness, the drugs, the alcohol. What really impacted me was there was a time during this time that I was trying to change my life when I found myself in a church, a local church, and because of my musical background, they had actually put me in the sound booth running their sound equipment. Why they did that or why the Lord did that, that's still, I find that strange even today. And the reason I find that strange is because the pastor of the church, there was another guy there named Paul, uh, and some of the deacons, they knew my background and they knew that I was a drinker. So this is what you would look at on a Sunday is I would go to church, wouldn't have anything to drink that morning, and I would get in the sound booth. Here I am praising the Lord and running the sound booth and doing all the digital media platforms for the church. And I would leave the church, stop off at the alcohol store, buy a bunch of beer, go to the house because I already had my crown, and start drinking. And it was the same thing on a Wednesday night. Leave work, go to the church, practice with the choir team, go home and start drinking. And this is where and I don't shy away from talking about this because and there are people that look down on this. And this is where it led into me getting my felony. Uh, One of the areas that really took a huge impact was because of the bouncing from job to job, not taking care of myself, and some outside attacks from outside of my life that I just couldn't control. Uh, I suffered in paying some child support. And that's hard for a lot of people to hear uh, because they say, well, you're not taking care of your children. Well, I was a part of my children's life. Uh, you know, I did make some decisions with reenlisting in the military and so forth and never took them into consideration. And I've talked to them about that. They understand that. Uh, but what happened was my son had already turned 18, and I had received some paperwork from child support services saying that, hey, you owe X number of dollars. So I paid that. What I did not know about was this interest that they had compiled onto the child support case. And there's only a few states that do this. Because I did not pay that interest, which is considered part of the child support, they arrested me.
Wow.
And I spent 90 days in jail and got out of jail. I started paying, it was $400 a month on that. One thing led to another, and next thing I know, I've got another warrant for it because of this interest on this child support. So go to court. They put me on this probation thing. There was a nightmare situation with that. They said that I wasn't in compliance when I was. We went to court, showed that I was, but unfortunately, the judge ultimately charged me with this felony because I was not able to pay $33,600.
Wow.
So now I pay $700 a month towards that, and that's how my felony came to be. It sounds like a really twisted story because it is. There's a lot more to it. We would be here for hours about this, but ultimately, in a lot of ways, it comes back on me, and I admit that because during this whole time of paying this child support, I never questioned anything that I had ever heard of this interest thing. And the only paper that I ever saw that had interest was this one that said something about $22 and some change. I never questioned it. But what they were doing is they were charging, if I remember, it was like 12% per payment over 18 years. And that was never in any of my deduction paperwork. It's not stated in there or anything. So ultimately, because of this interest that I was not able to pay and I'm not able to come up with this large sum of money, I got a felony charge on it. Does it bother me? Uh, there are times it does, because that was my stupidity because of my addictions and because I was more interested in what was going on with me than being worried about what was important, and actually questioning things in life, that I made a mistake. And I accept that. So when I tell people that I've got a felony, the very first thing they actually go, okay, did this guy, commit some type of heinous crime? Did he, was some type of sexual assault? Did he murder somebody? Was it drugs? Something like that. When I tell them that this is related to child support, the very first thing most people do is look at me like I'm talking about a scumbag.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, I am, because if you want to know the story behind it, I'll tell you. My life is an open book, but it used to not be that way.
Right.
So when I sit down and I tell people, hey, this is who I am, you read in that description of who I am, I don't hide anything from anyone. And I've had conversations about my childhood, the family that adopted me, uh, the family I was born into, and what that legacy looks like. And a lot of times you get a lot of people that'll back away from you pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay with that. I made some mistakes and I accept my mistakes, and I learn and grow from all of my every single day. So getting back to that day I was standing in a shower and I didn't like what I saw, that was part of it. And so I went to my pastor, talked to him, and I quit drinking cold turkey. And a lot of people were surprised by it. I didn't go through addiction, any type of recovery program or anything like that. It was just a cold turkey thing. So for the next 7 years after that, I got embedded real heavy into the ministry. I actually went to seminary and got my license and ordination as a pastor, and completely changed my life. And whenever I would stand in the pulpit and I would preach, I would tell people that story. And I would tell people, hey, this is why I got arrested. This is why I went to jail. This is why I got a felony charge. And these are the things that I have done in my life. And this is really, in all honesty, where uh, the dragon in the night thing play, because I had started sitting down looking at all of the little journals that I had, digital notes I had taken, and that's where the growth of, or the inspiration came for the dragon in the night. But I encourage people to tell people their story. Don't shy away from it. No matter how people look at you, we all have our demons, we all have our past, we all have those skeletons in the closet. And I've even had people tell me, look, because of your background, because of your life, the life that you've lived, and the reason you've got your felony, I'm not going to read your book. I'm not going to support you, and I'm okay with that. That's people's choice to do that. Uh, I never shied away from those types of things.
Well,
If people want to know about me, all they got to do is ask, and I'll tell them every single thing I've ever been through.
you and I have some similar backgrounds, and we can talk about that another time. But one thing you said, and I just want to kind of mention it because it leads into another thing I want to ask you about. Is it seems to me when it comes to child support, because I went through a stage of that in my life as well, the system is not set up for men at all, and there is not a resource for men to learn about the system and learn. One, men don't want to get away from their responsibilities. I never did. I paid my child support for 19 years and would not change a thing about it at all. My oldest daughter from a previous marriage, she and I are best friends. I mean, she was not she didn't have the luxury of having a dad there 24/7 like my current two daughters do. But we grew together, and I done everything I could to take care of her in the situation that I was in. But there was nothing out there for me to find out, you know, anything I could do. It was like we went to court. No matter what I said, I was the bad guy. Period. And to be honest with you, I was not the bad guy, but that was just the way it turned out. But I wanted to kind of jump away from that, from talking about nothing for men in that realm, and go into books for men. So about 3 4 months ago, I decided I wanted to start reading, and I've never been a fantasy reader or anything like that my whole life. It's always been like technical books. But I took my daughters to this big old huge gigantic Barnes and Nobles and just started looking at books. And you've heard the stories. There are no books there that are really aimed at men. And I started searching for that kind of stuff, and really found by accident I don't know if you would call it a genre or what, but I found indie authors, and then I started finding a lot of men that were writing books, and I started buying a few and reading them, and that was kind of what I decided I wanted to support. But I wanted to kind of ask your opinion on it. Do you think that's a true thing, that there are really no books out there for men in the big marketing area of publishing?
I think that in that big world of the publishing, I think that you're writing a real hardcore, uh, you're less than a man. This is how you need to be, and uh, you need to believe this type. I don't think there's and I could be wrong. I don't think there's a book out there or even a section in any given bookstore or even online where you can go and you can say, hey, this author wrote what it's like to struggle as a man. These are the areas of the systems that can actually help you learn and grow. So, no, I don't say that there is, and to be honest with you, I don't even think there's a huge market out there that is dedicated towards men by themselves, unless they're focused on a certain genre of fantasy or like that. But no, I don't think there's a market out there that focuses strictly on men. I think everything is more focused towards women, children, or the family, and it's more of the how to be a better person than you are right now. Self-help.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you believe or that this is what you have to believe type scenario. So I don't think there's a market out there that, and I don't even know, and I would like to know if some guy sat down one day and wrote a book saying this is what it's like being me, and put all the hardcore truths out there, uh, the good, the bad, and the ugly of an everyday life of a guy. We hear a bunch of songs But I don't think there's a book out there that's like that unless it's a testimonial type book.
Right.
I don't think so.
Yeah, you can read something like a Jordan Peterson, one of his books, and he's not so much always about men; it's more about culture. Or you can read some people who were in the military, some of their books, and but generally those type of books are geared toward men if you can find them. But the problem is finding them, and I think it would be really cool if you could walk into a Barnes and Nobles, and there'd be a section where they were, actually trying to market to men. What I find interesting is you always see these statistics where, you know, like 36% of men actually read, where it's 64% women that read, and I wonder what comes first, the marketing side of it that has shifted away from marketing toward men reading, or men actually quit reading, and that's why the marketing is more toward women now. I don't know what come first, but what I found interesting is when I started finding some of these indie authors, and I want to talk about that term in just a minute. Is it seems that maybe they're not so much marketing toward a man, but they're written as not to offend a man or not to turn a man off. And that is kind of what I've really enjoyed so far in the books that I've found and been reading, because I'll be honest with you, there are things that I don't want to read. And, I don't want to read them. I want to read something that is fun or entertaining, and adventurous without throwing a lot of garbage in there. And so far, I've been lucky with most of the ones that I've found so far. But I'm wondering if the indie author is the way back for men actually getting books in their hands and having books written for them.
To be honest with you, yeah, I would agree with that. That the indie author is the avenue to change the literary world. There's some brilliant authors out there that are absolutely amazing. And I think that if someone or even a group of men were to get together and collaborate on a or a series or something like that is focused towards men and not really on a fantasy genre or that, but just, hey, this is what it means to be a man. These are the things that make you a man, taking responsibility for these actions. These are the hardcore truths of life, but not make it a self-help style book or a 12-step type program or anything like that. These are just the things that you need to take care of. At the same time, I think that the family today has gotten away from teaching responsibilities to kids. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be throwing a lot of thumbs down at me for saying that. And I'm okay with that.
It's absolutely the truth.
Yeah, and with me saying that, uh, there are things in my childhood uh, that, and there's as a matter of fact, Russell, he knows about it because me and him's talked about this. Russell Carroll, uh, the family that I came from taught me one way of living, but when I was adopted, I had to relearn what it means to be a person, somebody who knew respect and uh, knew how to respect other people. And I think that our society has gotten away from that. So I think that if men were to step up to the plate and put those books out there, especially in the indie author world, and say, hey, this is what it means to be a man. These are responsibilities that you're going to have to face. So when you get out there on your own, you better know how to cook. You better know how to do your own laundry, your bills, change batteries in a fire alarm. So these are the things that I think that society has gotten away from. And I think that if somebody was to actually sit down and write a book about these things, I think that they would grab a whole new genre of people out there that would be drawn to that, especially men and younger men. And I think that it would do amazing things. And I think it may even start a. Uh, so yeah, I think that the indie author world or the nation is the way to change that literary path. Uh, and I say that because there are famous authors now who started out as indie authors before indie author was, I think it was a term or a nation really. You go back and research them, and now here they are selling 100 million books around the world. And I think that if an indie author was to pick up that and run with it, I think that would be an awesome thing right there.
Let's talk about the term indie author because I'll be very honest with you. 5 months ago in my life, I had no idea what an indie author was. So if you were gonna give a definition of an indie author, what would an indie author be?
I would have to say that an indie author is an author who took the world on. They are the writing warriors. Uh, they're the freedom fighters. And the reason I say that is because they go against the norm of what the mainstream publishing looks like. If you're not some well-known author, your work isn't worth anything. So, I, in all honesty, indie authors are the warriors of the literary world. They are the next bestseller. They are somebody's next favorite author. They're the rebels when it comes to the literary world because they don't follow the mainstream rules. They go against everything that the mainstream says that an author is. They took a chance and they put themselves out there before the world with their writing, and really, in all honesty, don't care what anybody thinks about them. They worry about what people think about their writings.
Yeah.
Every author does secretly or even openly, but they took what they had in their heart and every inspiration that was given to them, and they handed it out there to the world to be judged. And they're the ones standing on top of the hill, holding that flag up that says, "I'm an indie author, and this is who I am."
So let me ask you a question about publishing as an indie author. Is Amazon, do you know, is Amazon really the only avenue out there for an indie author to get their works in front of people?
You know, when I first published my first book, that was the only avenue I knew was Amazon. And then I started doing research, and I don't know who brought the conversation up in Fellowship of the Indie Author Group about other avenues out there to publish on these different mainstream things, platforms that people knew other than buying a book from Amazon. So I started doing some research, and I found an article about Barnes and Noble. So when I looked into it, of course, I found that Barnes and Noble does this. They
Okay.
support indie authors, and they have a platform that is very similar to Amazon, but your royalties are higher. It's actually easier to work. So I tested it, put one of the books out there, and it came to life. So now, if you know the title of a book that's an indie author, and you know the author's name, you can walk into any single Barnes and Noble you want to, and you can buy The Dragon in the Night, The Addiction Battle, or The Shattered Edge, the Legacy, Forged Blade. So when I tested that, I was like, hey, this works. Just told some other authors about it, and now those authors are on Barnes and Noble.
Okay.
Then it bled over into finding out that you can go to Barnes and Noble and, as an indie author, because they support them, talk to the store manager. He'll talk to the district manager, or she will, and they'll set up where you could do book signings, and you could bring in books. They'll scan the little code. You got to get them through Barnes and Noble, of course. They'll put it in their system so people can buy the books, and then you can autograph it. And if you sell enough books in a location, or the system shows that you're selling a good amount of books, and it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of them, they'll print some of them and put them in your local store. So that's kind of neat to know that.
Yeah, it is.
But it's one of those areas that local store you could go into, order a book, and they'll ship that book in like 1 to 3 days. Whereas Amazon, it could take up to 3, 4, or 5 days before that book even gets, printed and shipped out. There are some other areas that I'm starting to learn out, but I haven't researched them. So right now we'll just stay with the Barnes and Noble and the Amazon thing. Uh, but I think because of the Barnes and Noble thing, because it's an actual well-known bookstore name, I think that kind of adds to people saying, "Oh, well, if you can get it from Barnes and Noble, this must be a good book." It's still an indie book, and I tell people if you want to look at what books are indie books and stuff, and I make sure they're in mine. If you look in the front cover of it, it actually says imprint, independent published.
Right.
So that's what I tell people to look for. Look for that, and you'll be able to tell, hey, if this is an indie book or not.
Okay. Well, interesting. I want to ask a follow-up question to that. So I have the Shattered Edge here in my hand, and I have the Dragon in the Night in my hand. When I open both of them and look inside the cover, both of them have the copyright date as March 2025. Now, is that because that's when Amazon printed the book?
No, that's actually when uh, the Dragon in the Night took me almost 5 years to write.
Okay.
And it, at the same time that I was writing it, I kind of got this urge to go off track of what I was used to writing, and I wanted to write a fantasy book. So while I was trying to figure out how I wanted to put the Dragon and Knight together, I started writing the Shattered Edge, the Legacy of the Forged Blade series. But when I was writing the Dragon and the Knight, at the time, I didn't even have a title for it. And I wasn't sure how I wanted to go about doing it because I wanted it to be different from your normal, this is what addiction is. I didn't want it to be the next 12-step program. But as I was writing the Shattered Edge, I was like, wait a minute. What if I wrote an addiction book that had kind of this fantasy thing to it, but it was based on the medieval times? You see the movies, knights going out to fight these dragons and so forth. So as I was starting to piece that together and writing the Shattered Edge, there's this song, and I don't know who it's by. It's something about chasing a dragon or the dragon chasing them, and they're talking about addiction. And I was like, wait a minute. That's how this needs to be written. Now how do I make it personal? Well, I'm an addict. And I started looking at all the addicts that I knew that are, some of them are still addicts, some of them have passed on. So that's how it came to be. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this dragon, I'm going to make that dragon the addiction, I'm going to make him the addict, and I'm going to put all of this in a medieval story. So as you're going through it, you'll see that, hey, there's people that come back into this guy's life and they're looking at him and they're talking to him, and you can see that they see what he's going through. That fall from grace, the get away from it, the relapse, and then the victory. So that's the way that came to be. So at the time that was being put together and being written, there were two books that were being written at the same time. And when they came to be, it just so happened that I finished them both at the same time.
Okay. I thought it was something different than that. That's nice to know. So yeah. All right.
Now,
Oh,
the only thing that I did do, and I did go make some changes to the Shattered Edge, is there were some areas that really honestly needed to be put back into it, and some little human emotion things. So I did put those back into it and released an updated version of it. So uh, I think the honesty, the reason I missed that was not only because I just made a mistake, but I was also more focused on the dragon and the knight than I was anything.
right.
So I got them both released at the same time, and that was kind of like a I'm a pat myself back type thing, to be honest with you.
Let me ask you about physical books versus ebooks. As an indie author, do you see that you're doing more of a physical book or more of ebooks?
Right now, it's getting real close to being a 50-50. Uh, the physical books sell more than what the books do, but the ebook count is starting to come up. I think the last time I looked at it, it was like 60% of my books are paperback, and then the rest are the ebooks.
Okay.
But those numbers are starting to come closer. So
So if you read a book, are you going to read an ebook or are you going to read a paper bound book?
I'm a paperback or hard copy type guy.
Yeah.
I like to actually have that physical book in my hand. And the reason that is not only do I like the feel of the pages turning it, I like the ability just to have that book in my hand. Is I have this weird thing I do when I'm reading a book, and I've got a red pen that I keep with me. If there's something in the book that catches my attention that I really honestly I don't get, it might be like a jump from time to time that there should have been a little bit more information in there, or something, go back and read something back in the beginning of the book because maybe I missed something. I use dots. So I'll put one, two dots, three dots. And I know what each one of them means. So when I go back and I look at that book, I know, hey, if it's got one dot, something missing here. If it's got two dots, it's like this whole time lapse thing. If it's three dots, I missed something somewhere in the book because this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And most times, about 99% of times, it's I just completely overread on something, and that's why I missed it. So now it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a real weird thing. Use a dot system instead of writing out words. But yeah, I prefer physical books.
I recently done a post and asked people. I was going to buy the Lord of the Rings trilogy. My wife already has it, so we have a copy of it in the house. But when I read, I like to read with two highlighters. One, I'll use a yellow highlighter, so if I come across a word that I don't know, I highlight it yellow, and I come across a lot of words that I don't know. But I do that so that I can go back and look them up and try to add those words to my vocabulary. And then if there are things that I don't follow or I don't understand, or if I see something that I think is an error or whatever, I'll highlight it with a blue marker. And then I go back and I try to figure out, okay, is it an error or, is it something grammatical or whatever? And I do that so that, I can learn as well. But I have those two colors every time I sit down with a book. I have both of them like right here in my hand and ready to go if I ever need them. So I like the hard copy of a book because of that. And with that being said, back to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, when I told my wife I was thinking about buying my own copy of it, and she's like, "Well, why? We already have it." I'm like, "Well, I'm going to mark it up. Yeah, go ahead, buy your own copy of it. I don't want you marking up my set of books." So we ended up doing that, and that works for me. And I know everybody annotates their own way, but that's the way I do it. And again, I'm really new at doing this and reading, so. I always say I'm really new at reading. I'm really new at reading fiction and fantasy. I have always been a consumer of technical books because I have an engineering background, so I can get down into the nitty gritty of stuff. But I wanted to read for pleasure instead of for work. I'll just call it work, and it's been a really interesting journey. But so, what do you like to read?
I actually have a wide genre that I like to read. I'm not focused on one specific genre that I read. Uh, Now, I'm not a real big fan of the fluffy the books. Uh, I'm not a Hallmark type person, uh, but I have read some that are borderline, that are absolutely incredible books. Uh, as a matter of fact, the only book that I've probably read in the past 30 years that actually made me tear up was written by Nicole Callahan. And that is probably the only book that, and I don't give any spoilers, look, because didn't you just get her book?
I was going to ask you if that was the one you were talking about because it is. Don't tell me because I don't want to cry before I get to
Yeah,
it.
I'm not going to. Yeah, uh, Nicole is an absolutely amazing author, and the way that she put that book together, it, it's going to touch you in the heart. I'll leave it. Uh, there's other authors out there that have brought back fond memories. Russell Crowe's one with his book uh, from younger days. Uh, Tyler Kirk, he with his book. I love the 1920s, 1930s thing. So, and that was really cool reading his. But yeah, when that got to me stuff, I was like, wow, this is what I hope people get a feel when they read, like the Dragon in the Night thing. And there's even some parts in the Legacy of the Forge of Blood. Put some things in there that I hope touches people's heart. Uh, but I didn't want to get too mushy with it. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the whole fluffy thing. But yeah, I'd read several different genre books, and I actually don't even mind reading technical books.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the Forged Blade for a second. So two of the, I guess you'd call them the main characters. So you got Kyle and Daria. So I'm reading, and as I go through the book, this is the first book. As I go through the book, I'm like, okay, they're spending a lot of time together. They're spending a lot of time together, but you never make that. I'll call it the love connection. So it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden, getting very close to the end of the book, their hands touch, and all of a sudden, and you never say it, but you can feel it. And I was like, oh, there you go. It is here. So there is that connection between the two of them because I wondered the whole way through until I got to that point. And, that was another place I actually kind of made a mark right there where it happened so I could say, when I get ready to do my review on it, I know where it's at in the book. But I was like, but it was done in a way, and I'll go back to how me as a man would want to see it. It didn't get down to the making out or anything like that. There was just a connection made, and you could feel it, and that was all that needed to be said. And I thought it was done very tasteful. So I really liked the way you did that. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'll be honest with you, I struggled with that all the way up to that point because I was like, how do I introduce this without turning this into a whole story?
Yeah, you did well.
Their relationship, their relationship does grow a little more. A little bit of a spoiler right there. Uh, but yeah, I didn't want to put it in that position of by chapter three, they're getting married type. Uh, but as you go through this story, you'll start seeing uh, what actually brings Daria into his life, what other characters into his life. Uh, Kale is having to learn things that he's never learned before, and the reason being is because of where this series is leading to, and all of these hard things in life. That's what is helping build the character, and Daria is a huge impact on that. So yeah, that of okay, well, this is where I need to put this. Okay, well, they touch hands type thing. That I think was the turning point for them.
Okay.
So I'm glad you caught that. I'm glad you liked it. That because I've been waiting for somebody to bring that up to me because I wasn't sure that was the right spot, but then a large part of me was like, okay, yeah, this is where I need to let this be known.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was the right spot, so you did well, and again, it wasn't overdone, and that's what I really appreciated about it was it wasn't overdone. So I wanted to ask you, as a writer, what tools do you use, or do you like do an outline of a book before you write it, or do you just come up with an idea and you build on it over time? Do you use a software to keep up with it? What is your process for writing?
I do the outline thing. I'm not a world builder type person. Me and Russell have talked about that. I'm not the type of person that sits down, okay, well, these mountains are going to be here and these cities are going to be over here and put this book together of what the world looks like. I get an idea, say, okay, this is what I want to go with it, and I start writing by chapter. And it might only be a sentence, it might be a paragraph saying, okay, this is what I want to happen in this chapter. And then I might alter those a little bit. But when I start writing, I don't follow that at all. It sits there, but I don't look at it until it comes time for, like, okay, well, that's the name of the chapter, and even that might change. But what I have written there is not what I end up with. So that's why I don't even really look at it. So it just kind of sits over there. If you were to look at the plot and the diagram that I have for the Legacy of Forge Blade, especially with Third Edge, it looks nothing like what I wrote down on there. So I might write it down, but I don't follow it. And the characters, they build themselves as I go.
So when you started writing the Legacy, did you know ahead of time that it was going to be a series of books, or did you decide that after you started writing the story?
Being an indie author, I took on that rebel side of it. When I first started writing it, the very first thing that other authors that write fantasy-based genres, whether it's grim, dark, or whatever, the very first thing every one of them told me was, do start out with a series. Write a single fantasy-based book and run with it and then go from there. Well, I didn't listen to them. Very first thing out the gate was, I'm going to make this a series. The hardest part about this has been, how do I make each book kind of a standalone book, but all of them bleed in together, because I've never done this before, and I went completely against the grain as a new fantasy writer and did everything that somebody told me not to. Well, I'm doing it. And it did it more to challenge myself as a writer than I did to say, well, you're wrong, somebody can do this. I wanted to challenge myself, and I'm still challenging myself with it. So yeah, it started out from the get-go to be a series with going against the grain.
Well, one thing I appreciated with it, I guess the last few pages of the book, you referenced the story continuing, but it did have an end. So you could have ended that book where you ended it at, and the story was done, and it would have been a standalone book. And I really appreciated that, because I've read a couple where they stop in the middle of a story, and it really, really drives me absolutely crazy. It reminds me of TV shows where they always end in a cliffhanger. One season ends in a cliffhanger, and you're like, oh my God, I gotta wait. Now I gotta wait for 6 or 8 months before the show comes back on and figure out what's going on with it. And I know a lot of people do it to draw the audience back in, keep them coming back. But for me, in a book, I think there should be an end to it. Even if there is another book that follows, and that's logical, but make it so it's standalone. And I thought it was. I thought it was a good standalone book. And if I were going to take anything out of it, it would have been the last couple of pages where you referenced the story continuing. But without that there, it was absolutely a standalone book.
I appreciate that. I wanted to make it a book that could stand on its own, but also bleed over into another book. Now, one thing that I did have to do is I had to go in and make some adjustments to the ending of The Shattered Edge because of the way that next book opens and the way that the story continues. And that came after a couple of authors had sat down and read it and was like, hey, if you're going to go into this, we just kind of suggested it. I didn't have to, but when I went back and looked at it, I was like, yeah, they're right about this. So I had to go back and add some human factors. Uh, with Kale's dad passed away the way that he did, I actually added a little bit more human connection to that. I think it's like a paragraph or two. But yeah, to be able to be one of those stories that if God forbid something happens, before the third final book comes out, at least you know the story of what's happening. Uh, because I won't be around to, finish the third one.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to try to get it as close to being able to do something like that as I possibly can. So I'm glad that you liked it, that you liked that way that I ended it. But like I said, I did have to make some adjustments to it.
I wanted to ask you about criticism. So, as an author, and I think it's in any field, but as a writer, you're you're putting yourself into I'm going to call it a piece of art. You're creating a piece of art that people consume, and you have a very personal connection with it. So, how do you deal with criticism, and what do you consider acceptable criticism versus something that's just too harsh and people are being, for lack of a better word, buttholes about it?
If it's constructive, I absolutely love it. I'm one of those people that, if it's constructive and it helps me as an author or even as a person, even if you get at me and yell at me on that, that uh, constructive criticism side, and the only reason I say that is because of the military. Come on, I don't get upset, don't get mad. But if people just want to be a butt and they just want to tear things apart simply because they can, I get frustrated. I think it's uncalled for. I think what people are doing ultimately is they're taking either their pet peeve or they're just a very unhappy person in life and taking all of that out on somebody else. Uh, have I caught that so far? I have caught some of it, and I don't put up with it. I will actually end things over here, not because I don't want to deal with that. That's I'm just putting it out of my life. Uh, do I do that as an author and even as a host of my own channel? Uh, I do that on my own personal life. If you want to be a butt, you want to be a critical person, and you just want to just completely destroy everything that goes on in people's lives, you're not going to be a part of my life. So, yeah, that criticism thing, uh, I do have two sides to me. I've got that side, hey, if you want to be constructive about it, I will sit down and I will listen to you for hours. And I'll pick your brain on, okay, well, what do you see in here because I'm not. Uh, but if you just, but I'll listen to what you have to say. I'll read what you have to say, but I'm going to walk the other direction at the end of the day. And I'm not going to turn back to look at you.
Yeah, I think with putting a book out and having people read it, it is you have to have a little tough skin, and you have to also probably put yourself in the reader's shoes as well, because nobody comes from the same background, and one, they don't have the, you know, your book's your child, so it's not the reader's child. It's just something they're picking up for enjoyment. But for me, I'm still going out there trying to find genres that I like, books that I like, and I'm trying to be open with what I think about them. But a lot of times, I just wonder how tough does your skin have to be? I think about myself at work when my manager comes to me and he criticizes, a decision I made, even though it's in a professional environment, I still have sensitivity to it because it was a decision I made. So now when you take something like a book where it's your passion is put into it, your heart is poured into it, and somebody makes a critical comment about it, even if even if it is meant to be constructive, I still think, in my eyes, I think you would have to have pretty thick skin to accept that criticism.
Yeah, you do have to have some pretty thick skin when it comes down to it. But I also think that it has to do with personality. Uh, if you're not willing to somebody's criticism of something that you've done, and listen to it whether it's good or bad, uh, and you kind of jump in there and you fire right back at it, that says something about you. Uh, so, like even in my job, I am a supervisor, uh, but I report to a project manager and the owner of the company. And if they come to me and they say something to me, you know, I listen to what they have to say. I put my 2 cents right back in the pot. I don't just bow down and walk away, but I do say, what needs to be said. But at the end of the day, it's really on how you deal with it, how you handle it. So if you're willing to say, hey, the criticism was just called for and turn your back and walk the other way, I think that makes you a better person than to you standing there fighting tooth and nail to prove a fact to somebody who's not going to listen to what you're saying in the first place.
Absolutely right.
And that's really, in all honesty, what it comes down to.
Yeah.
You're not going to change somebody's point of view. There have been times that, somebody comes to me and they're just being overly critical, that if I showed them, in black and white, what actually took place or why I did something a certain way or something, they go, "Oh, well, I didn't catch that. My apologies." And that's cool because they put themselves in a position down and say, "Hey, I accept that I was wrong." So if you're willing to say, "Hey, I was wrong," and that's your personality, I think that the whole criticism thing is not as heavy on you as if you're not willing to accept the fact that, hey, you were wrong about something. Uh, and I think that once you actually look at that and you say, hey, I was wrong, and you're willing to admit that, I think that makes it a lot easier on you.
Women do this too, and I'm not. So I don't want to eliminate women from the conversation, but I have this passion in my life where I want to support men in different areas, but it takes a man to be able to accept something like that and to be grateful for the criticism and, like you said, to move on. So yeah, I think that's another trait of being a man right there. That needs to be in the book that we were talking about earlier.
If you're willing to step up to the plate and say, hey, you know what, I was wrong, and you're willing to admit that, that makes you a better person all the way around.
Yep.
But there are the people in the world who will never admit when they were wrong. They'll never admit to their own faults, uh, and they'll never admit to just be but. So, but that's human nature.
It is absolutely. Well, you mentioned the your YouTube channel, the Indie Author channel. Um, why why did you start it? What are you hoping to gain from the channel? Where are you hoping it goes?
I take it one day at a time, really. I started out being a podcast host, uh, and it was a Christian podcast. And then I went over to the YouTube channel, did a couple the YouTube thing, just kind of figuring it out. But when I got away from doing the podcast stuff, and I started really looking at the indie author world and doing some research on the YouTube channel, yeah, there's some pretty cool ones out there that talked a little bit about indie authors. They might review a book. or something along those lines. Really, honestly, didn't find a lot of them who would sit down and talk to the indie author, ask them who they are outside of being, uh, you know, how did they get to where they are with the author. So I decided that I just make that journey, take that step, and get into that leap. It's taken on a lot faster than what I thought it would. I think when I first started it, I think I had like 12 followers. And I haven't looked at it today, but I think I'm getting close to like 70 or 80 followers now. And it's very a small window that can place in. Uh, but when I had the podcast where it was just something you would listen on a podcast on an app or something like that, there was like 500 or 600 people that were subscribed to that one. But that was a different genre. I mean, you got everything was about Bible studies and so forth. So you got a different field there. So this has been a little bit of a learning lesson. Uh, but at the end of the day, what I ultimately would like to see with it is I would like to see where I could get to where I have a co-host, uh, where there might be 10, 12 authors that are actually on the in a meeting, a Zoom meeting or whatever, and they're just talking about different experiences or marketing or something along those lines to help the indie world. And I'm hoping that that's where I could get it to, but I know that's going to be some time to, it's going to take some time to get it there. But right now, I'm just focused more on the indie author interviews and to get them out there and get their books promoted and get them promoted as authors.
I think that's pretty admirable of you to do that, and that's kind of what I was hoping for when I started. It was I didn't think about doing interviews. That was just something that happened organic, and I reached out to you and hey, it happened. So that's kind of cool. But I really like the idea, and I'm not a writer. I've been toying with the idea and writing some stuff down, but I'm not a writer, but I have been enjoying the content that I've been consuming, and I thought, you know what, I want to promote the content that I'm consuming because, yeah, one, I'm enjoying it, but two, this is the indie author is the kind of person that I want to support, and especially the ones that I've run across so far. So I've really enjoyed what I've been reading, and I thought, if I could do just something that could help promote or help one of these authors that I'm reading, I'm all in for it. So yeah, I'm glad to see that you're doing that with your channel, and I've gone back and watched all of the episodes on there. Even yesterday, you were doing one, and I was driving, so I couldn't watch it, but I listened to it, and it's just another way that I feel like I can support this this group of people. And back to your YouTube channel, so it's May 4th right now when we're doing the recording. There's 78 subscribers to it right now. I guess I only have a couple more things, but really because I don't want to take up your whole day. I know there's another book coming out the middle of the month for the Legacy of the Blade series, and we kind of mentioned that a little bit. But what's next out there for you? You mentioned a book 3 in the series? Do you have anything past that, or are you just going to see what happens?
Right now, I'm just going to. I think I may take a little bit of a break. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I'm going to spend some time promoting uh, this series. I'm not sure if I'll ever write another series. Might write some standalones, but I have some ideas down the road that I'm hoping will come to life. But right now, I think I'm going to finish out these 3 books, and then I'm going to take for a while. So that break may be 6 months, a year. Uh, but with the way that my brain works and that constant wanting to be writing and stuff, it could become January. I'm saying, hey, come July, I've got a new book that's going to come out. Uh, but writing book is more on just getting this one completed and just see where it goes from there.
We've talked about your YouTube page or your YouTube channel. You're on X. So in the description of this video, when I publish it, I will make sure I link to both of those so people can find you. Where else would you point people to find you?
I actually have a blog also that I write on, and I post a lot of those on my X page at all. Also, and that's an indie author channel blog also. I do a lot of writing about indie author type stuff. I think I've got other things in there that go back into life away from an author and some of the weird things that have happened around the world and things I've written about. But here lately, especially over, I guess it's November, December of last year, it's all been focused towards the authorship, marketing, uh, in different areas in the struggles of being an indie author. And I'm also open to other indie authors or podcast hosts that have got a blog. If they want to share something on that channel, they can just email it to me, and I'll kind of vet it, make sure that it's not destroying people's life. That now I'll put it on there. So I'm open to that right there. But yeah, they can go to the blog or X and also Instagram.
Okay. I'll reach out to you and get your URL for your blog and your Instagram handle, and I'll make sure I include those for you as well. Um, I wanted to tell you thank you. Thank you on a multiple fronts. One, thank you for writing the books. I really enjoyed the first one. I'm looking forward to reading the next one in the series, and I'm also looking forward to reading The Dragon in the Night, which I just got. It hasn't even been open yet, so I'm really excited about that. And then I wanted to say thank you for joining me and doing this episode with me. I really appreciate it. I really like the idea of making that connection. And there's a lot that can happen in a text-based communication on X, but I think a face-to-face or a physical conversation just goes a really, really long way. And I appreciate you sharing everything with me.
I appreciate you having me on. I'll be honest with you, I was kind of nervous about doing this because being the host, it's one side of the table, but when the one being interviewed or the conversation is the guest or anything like that, it took on a little bit of a different perspective for me.
Well, heck, I hope he comes back because I lost Stan on my end. But if he doesn't come back, then again, I want to say a tremendous heartfelt thank you for him doing this. And y'all, I really hope that you enjoyed it. And I'll leave some stuff in the description for you to see where to find Stan at. But really entertaining books and just a super nice guy. So definitely reach out. Follow him if you can, support him if you can, buy his books. And y'all, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Y'all have a great one. Take care. Bye.